Hello, everybody. It is February 14th, 2026 here in the United States of America. And in today's video, I'd like to talk about Iran and the situation that President Donald J. Trump finds himself in, being involved in this conflict between Iran and Israel. So, first of all, for those of you unfamiliar, which I'm sure there aren't many, Iran and Israel have been at constant odds with each other for quite some time now, I would say ever since the Islamic Revolution. Israel views Iran as its mortal enemy, and Iran views Israel as a blight upon the Middle East that needs to be pushed back into the sea, and the land that was once occupied solely by the Palestinians needs to be given back to them. And neither party seems to be able to tolerate the existence of the other. There has been a chess game going back 40 years or so between the two regional powers to gain dominance over the region and eventually bring about the other party's destruction. Israel wants to overthrow the Ayatollah, the revolutionary government that came into place after the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and replace it with a government friendly to the West that will no longer behave in an antagonistic way towards Israel, funding groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and giving support to the Houthis. These three groups are currently in conflict or have been in perpetual conflict with Israel for quite some time. Iran, on the other hand, wants to destroy the Israeli government, free Palestine from what it sees as a colonial project of European Jews, and to destroy Zionism as a political movement. There are some people that say Iran wishes to eradicate the Jews for simply being Jews. That doesn't appear to be the case. There are 10,000 plus Jews actually living in Iran that have not been eradicated. But these two groups might feel differently from one another, but I'm saying from an outside observer looking in, Iran's policy seems to be built around a reaction to how Israel was formed, the provocative way which it was established in the 40s, and the way that it has conducted itself since then. Although some people do frame this as a religious conflict, it appears to be more political than anything else, but it's still given a religious facade. That's just how I see it as an outside observer. Those, I guess, involved directly might feel differently. So that kind of sums up why Israel and Iran tend to not like each other. It's a very surface level analysis of it, but this isn't going to be a 2-hour video. I'm sure there's quite a bit I'm leaving out or glossing over, but that's intentional, but you get the idea. So Israel, to ensure its own survival in the region, being a small strip of land with its back to the sea and a small population in comparison to its neighbors, uses the United States military as a guarantor of its safety. The United States has been involved in the Middle East for quite some time. It was involved in the Soviet-Afghan war, which is kind of adjacent to the Middle East, I'd say, but still part of it, funding the Mujahideen. It bankrolled and funded Saddam Hussein and his war against Iran after the Islamic Revolution within Iran. It was involved in Desert Storm, the invasion of Iraq in 2003, the Syrian Civil War, the Libyan Civil War. It's had involvement for quite some time in quite a few conflicts in the region. A lot of it has to do with oil, but a big part of it has to do with ensuring Israel's safety. Again, because if you're a small state like Israel with a limited military and you are surrounded by potentially hostile neighbors, you had better have a card to play to protect yourself, and Israel's card to play is the United States. This is why Israel has worked for quite some time, for a very long time, to maintain a great deal of influence within the United States government. Now, this used to be done fairly subtly, where a lot of people tolerated it, and they didn't really notice it as much as they do now. But I think over the last decade or so, Israel has become very heavy-handed in trying to maintain its influence with the United States, and in doing so, it has actually poisoned the well for its support here within the United States, and this is just an objective observation of it. People might disagree, but that's just the truth. Ask anybody. The subtle influence has turned into an overt influence where politicians are now openly cheering on and seemingly putting a foreign power's interests over the interests of their own constituents. That's a perception that a lot of people have. And there's religious reasons tied into this too. Evangelical Protestants, many of them are dispensationalists that view support of Israel as a religious matter, something that they cannot question, and that has been tied in with American foreign policy. So we have this situation now where Israel's support within the United States is starting to wane as it becomes more and more apparent that many people view the influence that Israel has over our government as something that is inappropriate and something that needs to be drastically scaled back and is a detriment to the American people as a whole. That is the opinion that many people have over it. If people in AIPAC were smart, they would listen, because it's a matter of their own survival as a nation that they maintain the support in the United States. That's also just a fact as well. I know many pro-Palestinians don't want to hear that, but that's just the truth. That's why AIPAC and the pro-Israel lobby is so aggressive about maintaining their support. They know they need it. If they lose the support of the U.S. military, then they lose the biggest card they have to play. And if they ever end up in a regional war with the region's major powers, they're at a major disadvantage and run the risk of actually losing the war. Although it is thought that they have nuclear weapons also as a contingency plan, and they would threaten to use them if Israel's territory was ever actually invaded. I don't think anybody would want that to happen either, because millions of people could potentially die. So that is the situation that Israel finds itself in. Maintaining its support within the United States is crucial to its survival as a political project, as it currently exists. It's smart strategy. I don't fault them for it. I think any nation in their particular set of circumstances would probably do the same. Now, if people are against Israel doing that, well, I understand, but the Israel lobby also needs to understand that support for Israel is not unconditional, and that there are things that they can do and strategies that they can undertake that will undermine the influence that they desperately need. And as I said before, if they were smart, they would listen to the criticism that they're facing and majorly scale back their open efforts to maintain the level of influence that they feel they need to protect their country. Okay, so fast forward to 2026, there is speculation again that President Donald J. Trump is considering launching a military strike against Iran to either neutralize its leadership or neutralize its nuclear program once and for all. Now, as part of this chess game, Israel vehemently does not want Iran to possess a nuclear weapon, because that is the great equalizer on the geopolitical playing field. The nations that have nuclear weapons tend not to get messed with. Look at North Korea. The amount of regime changes and covert operations and military operations that have taken place against Iran would be unthinkable in North Korea because of the fact they have nuclear weapons. Now, the Ayatollah has said that they do not want nuclear weapons. He's against it for religious reasons. There are many within the Iranian government, many hardliners, that are pushing for Iran to build nuclear weapons as that trump card that they need, that leverage that they need to finally be left alone, so that there's a understanding of mutually assured destruction between Israel and Iran. I don't know if Iran would actually build a nuclear weapon. They would be smart to do so for the reason that I just mentioned. I'm not saying it's a good idea for the region, but if you're looking at it from like a purely strategic situation, like it would make sense to do so. And see, that's the thing about this channel, and I think this is the misunderstanding that a lot of people have come to watching my videos, is when I give like strategic analysis, I'm talking about the sensible actions that each side should take or would take hypothetically to ensure their own survival or to ensure that their strategic goals can be met. Now, this might upset some people. This is why I mentioned AIPAC trying to maintain as much influence as they can for Israel within the United States. It's doing it because Israel needs the United States military for its own survival, of course. When I talk about Iran building a nuclear weapon, When I say they'd be smart to do so, I'm not saying it's a good idea, but for strategic reasons, if you have a nuclear weapon and you want a potentially hostile power to leave you alone, or, well, if you want a hostile power to leave you alone, then it's probably a good idea to have nuclear weapons. This is what North Korea did, and it worked. So I'm not, again, like, I have my own opinions, and I have my own views on these subjects. I do, but I'm not on here as an activist. I'm just looking at this from a strategic standpoint, and I'm talking about the actions taken by each side and what each side should do in accordance with their own strategic goals. So just putting it out there. I'm not on here cheerleading for Iran or Israel, or on here making a video vehemently against one of the two parties. I received a comment recently on one of my other videos from apparently an Iranian activist who threatened me and was very upset that, again, I'm talking about the Iranian government from like just an outside observer's standpoint. I'm not in here to fight anyone's revolution. I'm not on here to advocate for your side, although I have my own opinions. So if I criticize something AIPAC does, or say that AIPAC would be smart to listen to criticism, well, that's just true. When I criticize the Iranian government, or maybe say that they should take certain actions to ensure their own survival, that's just true. That's just the way it is. It's the analysis that I like to give. If that offends or upsets anybody, don't know what to tell you. That's not what I'm here to do. But anyways, okay, back to the subject. I'm meandering off too much. This isn't going to be a long video. But President Trump finds himself in a pretty precarious situation politically because of this. His entire platform was based upon no more new wars, no direct involvement in any new wars in the Middle East. Israel, though, their interests don't really align with that. Israel wants the Iranian regime toppled by any means necessary, although it doesn't have the means to do so militarily. Yes, they can engage in subterfuge. They're very good at that. They can't forcefully overthrow the Iranian government. They don't have the weapons and the means to do that. The United States, however, does, which is why they want the United States to finish the job. Again, for their own survival. They want to take a major adversary off the chessboard. The United States doesn't need to take Iran off the chessboard to ensure its own national interests. Frankly, the existence of Iran in one way or the other doesn't really affect the United States as much as many people assume that it would. And launching another military strike against Iran would be seen as something very unpopular, especially in the United States, especially with the midterms coming up. President Trump is already in hot water over the Epstein files, and, perceptions of failed policies at home. His support is considerably down from what it was. Many people are questioning his leadership ability and decision making, and whether or not he's compromised or too compromised to actually keep his campaign promises about taking on the deep state. And I think Trump knows that he can't afford a direct war with Iran, and Iran knows this as well. Like, this is about forcing Iran to the table, forcing Iran to negotiations, which is why there's now 2 aircraft carriers in the region. Now, it was thought that while these protests were taking place a few weeks back in Iran, that was the time to strike, that the Iranian government was facing an open armed rebellion, and that the government was in a weak position because of it. It was under a lot of strain, and then the time to strike was then. Well, President Trump didn't pull the trigger, I think much to the frustration of Israeli officials who, again, wanted to finish the job when the time was right. Well, the rebellion in Iran fizzled out, I'm guessing from lack of popular support and resources within the region, and then counterintelligence operations from Iran, and also help from Russia and China, who wish to keep the current Iranian government in power, again for their own strategic reasons. Iran knows that President Trump is in a weak position politically, and that if they do refuse to negotiate, it is unlikely that President Trump will launch a strike against Iran. But also, too, they know that Israel has quite a bit of influence over President Trump, and may force him into a corner where he acts regardless of how much it will impact him in the midterms. But there does seem to be some pushback and resistance against the idea of actually striking Iran before negotiations again, from President Trump's part to Benjamin Netanyahu. So this is the situation we find ourselves in, to sum everything up. Israel wants to topple the Iranian regime. They feel like this is one of their last opportunities to do so. They can't do it militarily. They want the United States to use their military to facilitate this. And it seems that ultimately all the United States actually wants at the end of the day is some kind of deal that guarantees Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, and that there can be some sort of lasting peace between the two parties, and the United States can then exit the region. That seems to be the ultimate goal. The United States doesn't seem legitimately interested in direct military action against Iran, despite all the lobbying within the American government to make this happen. Now, Israel, though, sees this as an existential crisis. If Iran continues to exist, then they will continue to face resistance in the region. That this opponent needs to be taken off the chessboard, and there's no way around this. There's no negotiating, and there's no making peace with this government. So Israel wants the United States to act decisively. Members within the United States government, within President Trump's administration, don't feel it's necessary to get the United States involved in another war, and they think forcing Iran to the table through negotiation is probably a better option. But they want to seem prepared to act if things don't go the way that they wish, as part of negotiating leverage. And Iran knows that the United States is in a situation where its president can ill afford politically to engage in another Middle Eastern war, and that actually might hurt him very badly in the midterms. But regardless of who replaces President Trump, the Iran policy probably won't change in any meaningful way. It'll probably stay the same. So whether something happens out of all this entire situation, I'm not entirely sure. I guess we'll wait to see what happens. I think I would like to say that President Trump won't act militarily because it's too risky politically, but I don't know if the Israel lobby will be able to leverage enough support against the president to force his hand. And I don't know if Iran will finally pull the trigger and build a nuclear weapon, if they will feel that's too provocative to the United States that would guarantee some kind of military response before they can really figure out a good delivery system for it. Or if the religious reservations that the Ayatollah has against nuclear weapons will prevail, or will naked pragmatism be what determines Iran's course of action with having a nuclear weapon. But anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I don't want this video to go on forever. I'll be back with a live stream hopefully sometime tomorrow afternoon, maybe around 2 or 3 if all goes well. If you enjoyed this content and you like this analysis, please drop me a like, subscribe to my channel, share my videos, and I will see everybody next time.